So today, guys, we're gonna take a look at the Green New Deal and everything that entails, what that's all about. So let's get right down to it.
All right, the Green New Deal is recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. In the House of Representatives, Ms. Ocasio Cortez submitted the following resolution, which was referred to the committee on this date. It hasn't been actually referred to the committee yet. This is just the final, draft of her resolution. So, the resolution is recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal, whereas the October 2018 report entitled Special Report on Global Warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is about 34.5 degrees Fahrenheit, by the International Panel on Climate Change, and the November 2018 Fourth National Climate Assessment Report found that one, human activity is the dominant cause of observed climate change over the past century, which I went and throughout this, I'm gonna refer to some things that I looked up. I looked into that, and climate change specialists all seem to agree on that fact. Number two, a changing climate is causing sea levels to rise and an increase in wildfires, severe storms, droughts, and other extreme weather events threaten human life, healthy communities, and critical infrastructure. So, I looked into some of those statistics, and the sea levels have risen 4 to 8 inches over the last 10 years. In addition to that, 6 out of 10 of the costliest wildfires have happened since 2010, sorry. The four that didn't occur since then were two of them in 2007, one in 2008, and one in 1932. So, of the 10, all but one of them happened since the year 2000. Natural disasters have steadily been on the rise, at least in the last 100 years. I wasn't able to find concrete statistics, but there have been more national disasters reported in the last 100 years. But not more reported, but each year there's tend to be more than the year before. Next we have global warming at or above 3 degrees Celsius beyond pre-industrial levels will cause a mass migration from regions most affected by climate change, b, more than $500 billion in lost annual economic output in the United States by the year 2100. Wildfires that by 2050 will annually burn at least twice as much forest area in the western United States than was typically burned by wildfire in the years preceding 2019. I wasn't able to find exactly how they came up with those numbers, but it does seem to be the general consensus among climate change experts, so it's a correct claim. A loss of more than 99% of all coral reefs on Earth, same as before. More than 350 million more people to be exposed globally to deadly heat stress by 2050. Obviously, if global temperatures are rising, more people will be affected by heat. So, again, that's a given. And F, a risk of damage to $1 trillion of public infrastructure and coastal real estate in the United States. If there's going to be, higher temperatures causing water levels to rise, there's going to be more tsunamis, there's going to be more natural disasters, there's going to be more fires, and all that's going to cost, it's going to increase in cost if the frequency of these events continues to happen. Number 4, global temperatures must be kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels to avoid the most severe impact of a changing climate, which will require a, global reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from sources of 40 to 60% from 2010 levels by 2030. Now, I was able to find that since 2016, greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. have decreased by 2.7%, but the EPA claims that those reductions are due to things happening in the private sector as opposed to regulations by the government. So it stands to reason that if we, do have the government come in and put up more sanctions or whatever, and the private sector continues to make the advancements that they have, then the numbers will continue to drop. Uh, and B, net zero emissions by 2050. So they want the U.S. to stop releasing greenhouse gases in the next 20, so in the next 30 years. 31, we're still in 2019. So I don't know how they intend to do that, but that's what this bill's here to figure out. So let's continue on. Now that's those are the reasons why this bill was drafted. These are the ways that they intend to do this. So, whereas because the United States has historically been responsible for a disproportionate amount of greenhouse gas emissions, having emitted 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions through 2014, and has a high technological capacity, the United States takes a leading role in reducing emissions through economic transformation. So they're claiming now that if we change the way our economy works, we'll be able to, change the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we put out. The next part reads, whereas the United States is currently experiencing several related crises. So these are all things that are happening because of global warming, allegedly. So, life expectancy declining while basic needs such as clean air, clean water, healthy food, and adequate health care, housing, transportation, and education are inaccessible to a significant portion of the United States population. So, I was able to find that life expectancy has dropped in the last few years, but it's credited to drug use and suicide, not the standard of living. I guess you could make the argument that people use more drugs and, commit suicide because their standard of living is dropped, but I don't know that I personally can prove that, but that's an argument could be made for that. Now, as far as clean air, in the 45 years since the Clean Air Act was enacted, air quality has improved 73%, while domestic production of goods has increased by 324%. So, to make the claim that the air is, getting worse, I don't know that that can be an argument to be made because the EPA is reporting that the air has improved 73% in the last however many years since 79, I believe, the Clean Air Act was enacted. Clean water, on the other hand, the availability of water has risen from 61.42% of Americans to 71.4% from 2000 to 2011. But it dropped back down to 71.22% in 2011 and then dropped again to 71.09% in 2003. But it rose back to 71.14% in 2014 and 71.16% in 2015. I wasn't able to find any statistics more recent than 2015, but it appears that it was steadily going up. It dropped just a very tiny amount and then started raising again at a tiny amount. So to claim that there's less clean water is also, as far as I was able to find, a statement that isn't entirely true. Healthy food, on the other hand, food insecurity rates have been steadily dropping since the Great Recession in 2008. The most significant drop was between 2000 and 2015, and we still haven't reached pre-recession rates. So even though the availability of food has been raising, we're still not to the point we were before 2008, whenever we had that big recession. Healthcare prices have risen 21.6% since 2007. So healthcare, though maybe not harder to actually obtain, is harder to pay for. So that's true. And homelessness rates, they've been steadily rising since the recession. They haven't dropped in any menial way since then. And education quality and the availability of at least secondary education they've been declining over the past 10 years exponentially. They just keep going and going and going. So the next part here says, a 4-decade trend of economic stagnation, deindustrialization, and anti-labor policies that have led to hourly wages overall stagnation since the 1970s, despite increased worker productivity, the third worst level of an socioeconomic mobility in the developed world before the Great Recession, the erosion of the earning and bargaining power of workers in the United States, and inadequate resources for public sector workers to confront the challenges of climate change at local, state, and federal levels. So, now paychecks have been the highest they've been in 40 years, but the purchasing power of the US dollar has, you know, stayed about the same. So we're making more money, but since the dollar amount hasn't really gone up, we're able to buy less with it. So, you know, that much is true that yes, people are making less money. If there's a direct relation between that and global warming, I wasn't able to find it, but Ms. Cortez here is making the claim. Uh, Now the what was it called here? Sorry, let me look. Sorry about this, guys. Socioeconomic mobility. This is judged by the amount that children make compared to the amount that their parents made. So that has been falling steadily since the Great Depression. Not the Great Recession I talked about earlier in 2009, but the depression in what I believe was the 30s, after the Dust Bowl and everything. So people have been making the same amount or less as that their parents had made since the 30s. So that's if that doesn't change, then yes, the economy will continue to fall. But does that have anything to do with global warming or sorry, climate change? I can't say, but I don't see you know, the merit in that statement. Now we get into the top 1%. Oh, sorry, we have the greatest income inequality since the 1920s, with the top 1% of earners accruing 91% of gains in the first few years of economic recovery after the Great Recession. So, I'm sure you've basically all heard about that before. The top 1% makes most of the country's wealth. And if you factor in the whole world, I believe it's something like the top 1% makes more than 99% of the entire population combined. So that's also true. Again, what that has to do with climate change, I couldn't tell you, and I wasn't able to find a correlation between the two, but the claim is being made. A large racial wealth division amounting to a difference of 20 times more wealth between the average white family and the average black family. Now, I pulled up some charts, and in 2018, whites made about $120,733 more than average black families, and $121,133 more dollars than Latino families. So there certainly is a gap between the pay of minorities and white people. That's an issue, I would say. I don't know. There's a lot of controversy over whether that has anything to do with someone's race or the jobs that people of that race would apply for or whatnot. That's not the point of this video, but there is a gap, and that's an issue. But again, I don't know that has anything to do with climate change. I'm probably going to be making that statement quite a lot through the rest of this because there's a lot of strange claims that don't seem to have anything to do with climate change but are made anyway. Next is the gender earnings gap that results in women earning approximately 80% much as men at the median, whereas climate change... Sorry, that's the next part. So that claims that the gap is 80%, but the most recent statistic I was able to find says 20%. Again, same with the racial wage gap. It does exist. Is it due to the fact that they're women and, the other group is men? I can't tell you that because I'm no expert in socioeconomics, but that's the claim being made. So that's all about that. The what climate change is what is happening because of climate change. So next we get into, whereas climate change, pollution, and environmental destruction have exacerbated systematic racial, regional, sorry, I have to get to the next page here. Racial, environmental, and economic injustice, referred to in this preamble as systemic injustices by disproportionately affecting indigenous communities, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, depopulated rural communities, the poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth, referred to in this preamble as frontline and vulnerable communities, whereas climate change constitutes a direct threat to the national security of the United States. So as far as I can tell, what that is claiming is that, climate change affects every group of people except straight, white, non-millennial males more than anybody else. Now, is that true? What I was able to find is that those people are affected by that, but that's a direct result, again, of the gap in economics, and it's mostly people that make less money, aren't able to move out of the locations mostly affected by climate change. The hotter areas, the areas more subjected to natural disasters. So again, this time, yes, climate change does affect that, but I wouldn't say that they are victims of those things because of climate change. But the way we're going to get into how the climate change constitutes a direct threat to the national security of the United States by impacting the economic, environmental, and social stability of countries and communities around the world. So, if we're focused on, repairing damages done by natural disasters or dealing with the influx of hospital patients because of heat waves and whatnot, we're not going to be able to focus as much on furthering our economy. We're going to have to deal with the wake of all the natural disasters and heat waves and everything. By acting as a threat multiplier. So that, again, I know personally when it's hot out or when it's incredibly cold out, I am certainly a lot more irritated and prone to snapping than on a day where it's comfortable out. So the claim that I believe it's making there is that, if people are on edge because it's hot or because they have to worry about a natural disaster, then they're going to be, less docile and harder to keep under control. Now, whereas the federal government-led mobilizations during World War II and the New Deal created the greatest middle class that the United States have ever seen, but many members of frontline and vulnerable communities were excluded from many of the economic and social benefits of these mobilizations. And whereas the House of Representatives recognizes that a new national social, industrial, and economic mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II and the New Deal is a historic opportunity to create millions of good, high-wage jobs in the United States, to provide unprecedented levels of prosperity and economic security for all people of the United States, and 3, to counteract systemic injustices. So what she's claiming there is that there hasn't been anything like this since the original New Deal back after World War II, which Cortez has publicly, said was a bad idea, the New Deal, but she thinks that her New Deal will be much better, and mostly that's because it will, help right the injustices done to the disenfranchised throughout U.S. history. Is that the case? I don't know, but I thought the focus of this, before reading it, was to help combat climate change, but the further and further you get, the more it seems that it's an attempt to work on race and gender and socioeconomic relations between the different classes throughout America. That could just be my personal bias on the issue, I don't know, but that's really what it seems to be to me. So is the duty of the federal government to create a New Deal to achieve. Here we go back with this. There's a lot of repetition in this, as all bills. It is the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal to achieve net zero greenhouse gas. As I said before, by 2050, it's projected that we should no longer be producing greenhouse gases if we don't want a raise in temperature of 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, which is about 34.5 to 35.7 degrees Fahrenheit. To create millions of good high-wage jobs and ensure prosperity, and economic security for all people of the United States. An admirable, thought, but you'd think creating more jobs would probably create more industrialization, which would probably cause more greenhouse emissions, but I'm no expert. That's just what I see here. To invest in the infrastructure and industry of the United States to sustainably meet the challenges of the 21st century. Again, more industrialization. I'd imagine that she's referring to green industrialization, which is great, but as I said before, all of the, headway in industrialization as far as green energy and whatnot goes has come through the private sector and not because of government regulation. So to demand more government regulation could potentially help the problem, but it could also potentially hurt the problem. Again, I'm not an expert, but that's my 2 cents on the issue. To secure for all people of the United States for generations to come clean air and water, climate and community resiliency, healthy food, access to nature, and a sustainable environment, and promote justice and equality by stopping current, preventing future, and repairing historic oppression of indigenous communities. So again, look, I am all for equality, but when you're passing a bill to try and combat the effects of climate change, I don't think that that's the place to go about doing this. Because say you're somebody who is a racist, but you do care about climate change. When this goes through, or, well, if it comes to, or whatever, and the vote comes up, well, they're just trying to, put us white people down, whatnot. They're not going to vote for it. So why mix such a noble cause with a quote-unquote controversial cause? It's not the place to go about doing that. In addition to indigenous communities, communities of color, migrant communities, deindustrialized communities, and depopulated rural communities. So again, that's, just a continuation of the groups of people that she wants to help. Poor, low-income workers, women, the elderly, the unhoused, people with disabilities, and youth, referred to in the resolution as frontline and vulnerable communities. The goals described in subparagraphs A through E of paragraph 1 referred to in this resolution as the Green New Deal goals should be accomplished through a 10-year national mobilization, referred to in the resolution as the Green New Deal mobilization, that will require the following goals and projects. So basically what that means is, this next part is going to go over the 10-year plan to, mobilize these groups of people to, band together and save the earth. The first goal would be building resiliency against climate change-related weather, including by leveraging funding and providing investment for community-defined projects and strategies, such as extreme repairing and upgrading the infrastructure in the United States, including by eliminating pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as technologically feasible. That's she said earlier that that state and local governments don't have as much access to the tools needed to go green. So this is saying, as far as technologically feasible, to get that sort of technology to those lower levels of government by the things. To do this, they're going to guarantee universal access to clean water, by reducing the risks possessed by flooding and other climate impacts, and by ensuring that any infrastructure bill considered by Congress addresses climate change. So, any bill considered by Congress addresses climate change. So, buildings, bridges, power lines, roads, all of that, I believe, is part of, in our infrastructure. So if you want to build a bridge, you have to build or repair a bridge, a road, some power lines, or whatever. You have to consider the impact that will have on the environment, which is great and noble, but you already have to jump through so many bureaucratic hoops. At least here in PA, my fellow Pennsylvanians can tell you that those things take a ridiculous amount of time, and adding more bureaucratic hoops is just going to extend that time. Again, it's for a noble cause, but until the technology is there to get those things done quickly and green, I don't know that that's the greatest idea, because it's going to, like I said, it's going to slow down the process, and infrastructures are going to continue to fall. Next is meeting 100% of the power demand in the United States through clean, renewable, and zero-emissions energy sources, including by dramatically expanding and upgrading existing renewable power sources and by deploying new capacity. So that's pretty straightforward, using and further continuing the use of green energies. So, if there's already green energies that are in use, going to figure out how to make them work more efficiently and try to discover new green energies. Building or upgrading to energy efficient, distributed, and smarter power grids, and working to assure affordable access to electricity. So again, a lot of rural communities and cities that aren't as big as places like, Los Angeles or whatnot, they have outdated power grids that run on fossil fuels. So this is her saying that she would like to modernize those and make them more green. A noble cause. I don't really have much more to say on that. I can agree 100% with that. That's a good idea. Working to ensure affordable access to electricity. Upgrading all existing buildings in the United States and building new buildings to achieve maximal energy efficiency, water efficiency, safety, affordability, comfort, and durability, including through electrification. So, I should have pulled up the number of buildings in the United States, because I'm sure that there's a lot. And she wants to rebuild all of these buildings to be more efficient. I think that that's probably not the most economically efficient way to go about doing that. I feel like that's probably going to cost way more than it's worth, and maybe skip that part and just go with the new buildings that are being built, have them be green, and slowly phase out the older technologies. And maybe if it becomes more affordable in the future, make it a priority then to fix the older buildings. But to make that a priority now, when the energy isn't as cheap or whatever, that's probably not the best way of going about it. Again, I'm no expert, but what are you gonna do? So, suppressing massive growth in clean manufacturing in the spurring massive growth in clean manufacturing in the United States and removing pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing and industry as much as is technologically feasible, including by expanding renewable energy manufacturing and investing in existing manufacturing and industry. So again, same with the buildings, except this is for the manufacturing of energy. So, same thing. Fix what we already have, and moving forward, continue going green. Noble cause. Again, I don't know if it's economically efficient, but still not a bad idea. Working collaboratively with farmers and ranchers in the United States to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural sector as much as is technologically feasible, including by supporting family farming, by investing in sustainable farming and land use practices that increase soil health, and by building a more sustainable food system that ensures universal access to healthy food. Now, I mentioned before, there is more food available than has been since the Great Recession, but to hope to have more food and maybe get back to the levels pre-recession is a good idea. Supporting family farms, I can support that. Factory farms do produce, I'd say, the majority of our food, and if we cut them out and went to the family farms, they're just going to become the factory farms that are there now. So you're just getting rid of the old wealth and creating a new wealthy class, which that's always worked in the past, let me tell you. Overhauling transportation systems in the United States to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector as much as technologically feasible, including through investment in zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and manufacturing clean, affordable, and accessible public transportation, and high-speed rail. So again, this is green cars. Elon Musk and the people at Tesla are probably pretty excited about that. Again, that's something I can get behind a large majority. I forgot to mention in the past one, a big chunk of greenhouse gas emissions do come from beef farming. A lot of methane is released into the atmosphere and whatnot. And I think another one of the bigger causes is cars running on fossil fuels. So, again, not a bad idea. Mitigating and managing the long-term adverse health, economic, and other effects of pollution and climate change by providing funding for community-defined projects and strategies. Pretty straightforward. Finding out what's causing these health effects, economic effects from pollution, and figuring out how to stop them and funding ways to stop them. Removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and reducing pollution, including by restoring natural ecosystems through proven low-tech solutions that increase soil carbon storage, such as preservation and afforestation. So, there's already ways out there to increase the amount of carbon that soil is able to hold. Continue with that technology and find a way to preserve and regrow trees. Again, not a bad idea. Restoring and protecting threatened, endangered, and fragile ecosystems through locally appropriate and science-based projects that enhance biodiversity and support climate resiliency. This bear with me through all this because it's repetitive, just saying the same thing through each part of the spectrum of whatever. So we need climate resiliency, and we want to boost biodiversity. There's a lot of species in recent years that have been put on the endangered / threatened list. There's also been a few species in recent years that have gone extinct. So, I don't know if other species should be our main focus, but I'm sure that them dying probably has some sort of effect on us as humans. So, go ahead, keep doing that. Cleaning up existing hazardous waste and abandoned sites to promote economic development and sustainability. Great idea, I think. There's a lot of old power plants, nuclear plants. There's tons of nuclear waste buried under the ocean, all kinds of that. Figure out a way to, safely get rid of that and store it, or in fact, just boom, get rid of it. That's a great idea. Identifying other emission and pollution sources and creating solutions to eliminate them, and promoting the integrational exchange of technology, expertise, products, funding, and services with the aim of making the United States the international leader on climate action and to help other countries achieve a Green New Deal. So, become the leaders in, climate change, and show other countries how to go about doing it as well. Noble, will it work? I found that, usually when the U.S. does something, everyone follows after. That's not true. But, we'll see how that goes. It's definitely a good idea. A Green New Deal must be developed through transparent and inclusive consultation, collaborative, and partnership with frontline and vulnerable communities, labor unions, worker cooperatives, civil society groups, academia, and businesses, and to achieve the Green New Deal goals and mobilization. A Green New Deal will require the following goals and projects. Providing and leveraging in a way that ensures that the public receive appropriate ownership stakes and returns on investments. Adequate capital, including the rough community grants, public banks, and other public financial technical expertise, supporting policies and other forms of assistance to communities, organizations, federal, state, and local government agencies, and businesses working on the Green New Deal mobilization. So basically, give more funding to groups on the federal, state, and local levels that are going to work on Green New Deal projects. Again, if that's what we want to focus on is climate change, that's definitely a good idea. Ensuring that the federal government takes into account the complete environmental and social costs and impacts of emissions through existing laws, new politics, and programs, and ensuring that front lines and vulnerable communities shall not be adversely affected. So, make sure that the federal government is keeping track of the impacts by, keeping track of the laws that are already there, and making new policies and making sure that they don't, hurt the front line and vulnerable communities. So the people working and the disenfranchised. Providing resources, training, and high-quality education, including higher education to all people of the United States with a focus on frontline and vulnerable communities, so these communities may be full and equal participants in the Green New Deal mobilization. Here's where it slips back into the social aspect as opposed to the, environmental aspect. So it's saying, yes, pay for schooling for people, but most importantly, people on the front lines of this project and the disenfranchised. So it's doing that, then yeah, sure, it's great to be inclusive, but if you focus more so on the people who are disenfranchised as opposed to equally focusing on everyone, you're just going to create a new group of disenfranchised people. Making public investments in the research and development of new clean and renewable energy technologies and industries. Directing investments to spur economic development, deepen and diversify industry and local and regional economics, and build wealth and community urgency while prioritizing high-quality job creations and economic, social, and environmental benefits in frontline and vulnerable communities that may otherwise struggle with the transition away from greenhouse gas intensive industries. So again, let's help everyone, but most importantly, let's help the people helping us and the disenfranchised. So we help the people more so that haven't been helped in the past than everyone else. Not let's help everyone equally, let's help everyone except the people who are considered to be the elite now. ensuring the use of democratic and participatory processes that are inclusive of and led by frontline and vulnerable communities and workers to plan, implement, and administer the Green New Deal mobilizations at the local level. Again, let's make sure that we use democratic purposes, but to make it inclusive but let's have it led by vulnerable communities. So now, this is the part that I saw that initially made me want to do this, because that's, claiming, who should be in charge are the disenfranchised. Not the people that are most qualified for the job, but those who have been, hurt in the past by injustices. So, say a white non-millennial male went for the job, and I don't know, Puerto Rican millennial female went for the job. We'll say the white guy has tons of experiences and schooling in, we'll say, electric motors, and he wants to go and help his local government, start utilizing that technology for their city buses. And the Puerto Rican lady also wants that job, but she doesn't have as much schooling and experience. I could be wrong about this, but it appears that, she's more likely to get the leadership position because she was previously disenfranchised. I could be reading into that wrong. That's how I see it. If you think otherwise and you can help me see it that way, by all means, please explain it to me differently. I would greatly appreciate it, because that's how I see it currently. All right. Ensuring that the Green New Deal mobilization creates high-quality union jobs that pay prevailing wages, hires local workers, offers training and advancement opportunities, and guarantees wage and benefit parity for workers affected by the transition. So people who are working jobs now that rely mostly on fossil fuels, help them get into jobs that will be affected by going green. Good cause. I like that one. Guaranteeing a job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family and medical levels, paid vacations, and retirement security to all people of the United States. Who's going to pay for that? Apparently they are. We'll see how that works. Last time that happened was Social Security, and that's all but dried up, but we'll see how that works. And it also says guaranteeing a job with all those things. I don't know if that means that every person in the U.S. will be guaranteed a job, or that if you have a job, you're guaranteed those things. That's another thing. If you can clear that up for me, please do. Strengthening and protecting the rights of all workers to organize, unionize, and collectively bargain free of coercion, intimidation, and harassment. I've seen arguments both for and against unionizing. I'm not going to get into that too much. I've been in a few unions, and the working conditions in those places were much better than some of the places I worked where it wasn't unionized. So I'm probably more for unions. But, I've seen arguments to say that they're bad for local business and things like that. But I'm not an expert. Strengthening and enforcing labor, workplace health and safety, anti-discrimination, and wage and hour standards across all employers, industries, and sectors. Good idea on the surface, but again, say I'm a white, non-millennial, straight male, and the same Puerto Rican female from earlier apply for the same job. One has more experience, and the white male has more experience than the female. The female, it appears to me, again, I could be wrong about this, it appears to me that they'll be making the same amount of money, even though they don't have the same amount of experience. Enacting and enforcing trade rules, procurement standards, and border adjustments with strong labor and environmental protections. Oh, I'll have to continue reading for this part, sorry. To stop the transfer of jobs and pollutions overseas and to grow domestic manufacturing in the United States, ensuring that public lands, waters, and oceans are protected and that eminent domain is not abused. So, keep the jobs in America as opposed to shipping them overseas for lower labor costs. I can get behind that. And to grow domestic manufacturing, same thing. Keep the jobs here, grow jobs here, in fact. And, to ensuring the public land, waters, and oceans are protected and the eminent domain is not abused. So, just because the government owns it doesn't mean that they'll abuse that right. Obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous people for all decisions that affect indigenous people and their traditional territories, honoring all treaties and agreements with indigenous people, and protecting and enforcing the sovereignty and land rights of indigenous people. Again, it's a noble cause. As I said it way back in my very first video, indigenous peoples have been, victimized, at least in the U.S., since the beginning of the U.S. So, to make sure that they're not being oppressed further is that's a positive thing. I can't really pick that apart too much. Ensuring a commercial environment where every business person is free from unfair competition and domination by domestic or international monopolies. You know what that sounds like to me? That sounds a lot like socialism, not capitalism. America, to this point, has thrived because of the competition between, businesses and whatnot. Supply and demand is really what our economy is based on. To get rid of that, I think, is probably not the best idea. But hey, socialism works out for everyone else who's used it. So we'll see. We'll see about that, I guess. Providing all people of the United States with high-quality health care. Affordable, safe, and adequate housing, economic security, and access to clean water, clean air, healthy and affordable food, and nature. So, again, that's another socialist idea. I can get behind socialized, health care, clean water, clean air, economic security. I don't know. That again, I think personally that our economy works as far as the way businesses are run. Maybe mess with the minimum wage, change wages and whatnot. But for the most part, it seems to work pretty well the way it is. So I wouldn't want to mess with that. But all those other things, clean water, clean air, affordable housing, free health care and schooling, that's all something I can get behind.
I hope that I went over everything well enough. I know I got a little more opinionated than I usually would, but hey, what are you gonna do? I'm a human being. So that's that. Sorry the video's late, but as you can see, it's a little longer than all of my other videos, so it took a little more time to do the research and whatnot. I think next week I'll continue with my yellow vest videos, and I have all the research done for my Kamala Harris video, so you'll see that between now and then as well. So keep on the lookout for those, and thanks again for watching, guys.